My name is Zoya. I'm a staff writer at Grist. I cover climate change and human health, but I also am a young person who cares about the planet. And I'm here with another young person who cares about the planet. Nayeli, you're coming from the UN, where they're discussing a lot of the issues that are going to get brought up at COP28 in a few months. What was the vibe over there? How is the climate change being talked about?
It was definitely interesting. It was my first time ever at the United Nations. So it was a really special opportunity that was like a pinch me moment, but it was extra special to be in a room full of world leaders that were discussing the topic of climate change, the climate crisis, and discussing solutions as to how we can save our planet and continue to live in this beautiful world that protects us and gives us so much. We need to remember that we have to protect her as well.
Mm-hmm. There was a huge climate march on Sunday that you were at. And activists of all stripes came out to protest and to make themselves heard. Climate activism has played such a crucial role in moving the agenda forward. Can you talk a bit about your organization, People Not Pozos, and how you started out in climate activism, environmental activism?
Definitely. I didn't wake up one day and decide to become an activist. My activism was born out of survival. I grew up 30 feet from an active oil and gas well in my beautiful community of South Los Angeles in California. And this oil well would operate day and night and would release toxic emissions that made not only me, but my family and the rest of my community sick. And in my personal experience, unfortunately, I have had it all from nosebleeds to asthma to cancer at the age of 19. And I fight, so my story ends with me. When I began my activism at 9, I didn't even know the word activism until I was 11. And I was doing what I felt needed to be done to protect my community because it simply wasn't fair. As simply as I could put it in my 9-year-old mind, it wasn't fair that there was an oil well in my community and not an oil well 5 zip codes down. It wasn't fair that I could breathe in toxic emissions and not another child's zip codes down. And People Not Pozos is a grassroots campaign in my community that fights tirelessly to permanently shut down the well, Alanco Energy, in my community. And I'm very proud to say that after years of us organizing, Alanco Energy is permanently shut down, and its oil executives are facing over 20 criminal charges.
Yeah, that's great. They put up a pretty fierce fight, though, right?
Oh, yeah, they fight, and as a woman of faith, I always think of David and Goliath, and I'm very happy to be David in this fight because I know how that story ends, and this is exactly how this will end as well.
Yeah. What lessons do you think you can extrapolate from that? It's a localized fight, it's in your own backyard. You're able to grassroots motivate people to get involved. We have this national effort now that's been underway for some time, as I mentioned, to get similar results. I mean, to get fossil fuels kind of out of the picture, which is a crazy thing to even, try and undertake. It rules so much of how we live our lives, but there is one solution to the climate crisis, and it is not using fossil fuels anymore. What lessons do you have from that localized experience that you think can be applied nationally?
It's extremely important to remember that it is possible. My community is living testament that a community that was ignored, silenced, viewed as disposable for so long created historic change. The city of Los Angeles is the largest urban oil field in the nation. And last year, this Los Angeles City Council and County Board of Supervisors voted unanimously to ban all new oil well exploration and phase out the existing wells within 20 years. That itself is historic. And that happened because of community activism. That happened because of frontline communities saying enough is enough. I believe everyone has a right to breathe clean air despite their age, their gender, ethnicity, socioeconomic status, or zip code. And it's crazy that we have to continue to advocate for that in a developed nation in the year 2023. 1 in 5 people worldwide die from the fossil fuel emissions. 1 in 5 people worldwide. Yet we're not advocating for each other the way we should be. We're not standing up on the front lines the way we should be. And sometimes it's important to remember within activism that sometimes showing up is just as important. Whether we say or anything or not, that standing in solidarity with another community is what makes that change. It's what fills that room. It's a lot easier to target 5 people, but if there's 50 people in the room, now they got a problem. Then we fill up with 500 people, and then they got a real issue, you know. And that's exactly what building community within this movement is. It's reminding ourselves of the power that we have as individuals. It's just as my vote counts, your advocacy counts. You're not using a plastic water bottle makes a difference. You're eating one plant-based meal a day, saves over 600 gallons of water on average. I don't know about you guys, but I can eat a PB&J sandwich every day. And it's something like that that leads this change, that leads our movement and continues to fuel that fire in our bellies to create change. And I'm fully aware that urban oil drilling is an odd cup of tea, but for me it was because of my upbringing and because of the love I have for my community. But we need people in design. We need upcycle designers. We need people advocating for animal agriculture, for water justice, for so many other aspects. And it's finding what fuels your passion and continuing to do that truthfully and unapologetically.
Yeah, that's an alarming stat. 1 in 5 people dead from fossil fuel pollution from coal plants and PM 2.5, et cetera. Climate activists are not always viewed favorably. I'm thinking of recent events where activists have blocked highways, thrown soup and other substances on historic artifacts, glued themselves to art. What do you make of this new wave of climate activism? Because it hasn't been particularly, I mean, it's been received in many different ways. And I'm curious where you fall on that spectrum.
It's definitely a difficult thing. I understand their urgency, because you can always replace something materialistic, but we can't replace a life. And what we're advocating for is a human life. We're advocating for the 500,000 Angelenos that live a quarter of a mile or less to an active oil and gas well, for the 18 million Americans that live within a mile or less from an active oil and gas well. It's hard to picture that number, but think of one individual. Think of a 9-year-old. Think of my mom developed asthma at the age of 40, which is unheard of. My grandma developed it at the age of 70. You know, we're fighting for real people with real lives, and the urgency that we all act with is the urgency we need to have the world act with. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, it's been an urgent feeling summer. I mean, it's been a summer of extremes. I think in Arizona it was like 31 days at 110 degrees Fahrenheit or above. That's a record for any U.S. city. You've got, flooding in the Northeast, hurricanes, landslides, all manner of things. And this happens every summer, right? Like, as a climate journalist covering this issue, I'm well aware that people pay attention to this issue in the summer, but this summer has felt particularly bad for me. And I'm wondering how you feel. I mean, where is your sort of like hope barometer?
I'm extremely optimistic. It's again because of the love I have for my community. I fight every day with everything I have because of the love I have for my community, because one day if I'm not fighting, I feel like I'm not advocating for an innocent 9-year-old who's becoming an activist out of survival like me. I fight so that ends with me. So urban oil extraction is only read about in history books, and it feels a lot with eco-anxiety and the fear of the climate crisis, as if we're studying for this major, but will this degree matter in 4 years if this job won't even be a thing anymore? And it's an extremely hard thing to navigate, but reminding ourselves that the feelings that we're feeling are, first of all, extremely valid, but we have to channel those back into our work. I'm sad. I have a lot of fear about the unknown. Well, let's fight today so we know that tomorrow there is a tomorrow. And starting with that. It's starting with, okay, I don't know what tomorrow has in store for me, if it's going to be 185 degrees or not. But today, my 2 legs are good, my arms are good. I'm going to go canvass for a new elected official. I'm going to canvass for this upcoming vote that we have. And it's extremely important to use our feelings and channel them back into our work, because as I mentioned earlier, something my mom has always said is every action has a reaction. And every action that we take is creating a sustainable future for our future generation. And sometimes it's not. So we have to think about every action that we take to not leave a better planet for this generation or the next, but 7 generations behind.
It's funny, is that like a thing moms say? My mom says that too.
Oh, then yeah, it's a mom thing. I thought she was like, yeah, moms. Oh, okay. My mom is here, by the way. Hi, Mom.
Well, speaking of moms and sort of older generations, what do you think that older generations can do to support young activists like yourself, the growing movement of people who are concerned about climate change, especially people who have the most to lose, the youngest people among us?
I think it's extremely important to remember that this is an intergenerational movement. We have so much to learn from our elders who have been fighting this fight for years. And I admire something that Jane Fonda says, it's not a sprint, it's a relay race. And sometimes you have to hand off the baton, and that's such a powerful thing within this movement when you're learning from an elder who has been on the front lines for so long, when you're canvassing with your mom, that's such a really cool thing to have. And I think working hand in hand with our elders as this next generation, learning from them what worked beautifully, what didn't work, what was scary for them, if their fears have gone away. I think it's also just being open with one another. I think there's a lot of power in vulnerability, and sometimes when we're active within this movement, we're so caught up in our day-to-days that we forget to check in on each other. And I think that sometimes we should also check in on our elders, because sometimes they're forgotten about and they have gone through more than any of us can even imagine at times. And by having that intergenerational relationship, by having that love for our elders and vice versa, we really are beyond unstoppable within this movement.
So you successfully shut down that oil well. What is next?
So the state of California last year, Governor Newsom signed and implemented into law a 3,200-foot health and safety buffer zone between all oil extraction and sensitive land for new oil wells, which is historic and incredible. Days later, the oil industry, oh boy, they spent $20 million on an oil referendum to overturn it and put it on, the referendum. So now it's on the ballot for November of 2024. That is our biggest fight. It really is all hands on deck. It's talking about voter education, voter turnout, public education, raising awareness on the deep pockets that the oil industry has and shedding a light on that, but also reminding ourselves that this is a David and Goliath fight, and everything that we do today can affect our fight tomorrow. It can affect the ballot in the next year. And I join you all to support us and share this news about SB 1137 that's on the ballot for the next year. It's going to protect and defend millions of lives, millions of innocent lives, and protecting the health and safety of our environment. Something many people don't know is that these oil wells operate under such immense pressure that every 10 to 15 minutes they open valves to prevent an explosion. So we're literally living next to a bomb. And the oil well in my community operated with 9 surrounding schools in the area. It shared a wall with a daycare for newborns to 2-year-olds. It was 30 feet from a senior living facility, all ages of life. And it shared a wall with a high school for children with disabilities such as paraplegia. In the event of an emergency, oftentimes there's also no evacuation plan in place for us. This is what we're fighting for. This is what we're going to end. Urban oil extraction has no place in our backyards. What do you guys think belongs in a community? Yell. I got a minute, guys. Yell. Playgrounds, schools, parks, coffee shops. Ooh, I like that one. Churches. Notice how not a single person said an oil well. How come it's the reality for 18 million Americans living a mile or less from a well? With your help, with our help, this is going to end in the year of 2024 for our health, our safety, and our environment.
Yeah, it sounds like nice. It sounds like a lofty goal, but the state of California is now suing Big Oil, and that lawsuit was announced just a few days ago. So it's not. I think maybe if you had said that here 10 years ago when you were like 11, that people would have been confused by what that really meant. But it's a different time. It feels like, at least for me. I mean, there seems to be a groundswell of. It's not just climate activism, right? It's also a lot of policymakers who are making pretty material changes, which is interesting. All right, well, thank you all so much. It's a great conversation. Thanks, Naomi.